Win in his own end zone, throws it short, the ball batted down by George Tarlas. And Boise State comes up with a key third down stop.
Well, for the 21st straight year, the Boise State football team celebrates their home opener in style. Last Saturday, the Broncos knock off UT Martin 30-7 behind yet another dominant effort on the defensive side of the ball.
Green under center, Halani the running back. Hand it to Halani, big hole right side. Halani's going to walk in after splitting two tacklers. Boise State now opening this thing up.
George Halani, also fantastic, over 200 all-purpose yards, and now the Boise State football team sits at 2-1 on the season. Welcome on into Jay's Sports Bar. I'm your host, Jay Tust. Of course, you know Shane Williams-Rhodes, one of the best wide receivers in Boise State football history. The Broncos get a chance to have their home opener on the blue, a sold-out crowd. You know what it's like to play in front of that, especially against UT Martin. You were there in 2013. Any better feeling than that?
No, that's the way you want to open it up, is with a team that you have a pretty good chance of winning against. So I was glad that was when we got to open up with, and it was not San Diego State.
Yeah, Boise State, they win 30-7. It's so funny because it kind of seems like this might be a reoccurring theme with this team. Not perfect, but more than good enough to get the job done. For the second straight week, that's kind of the narrative, I guess, that's out there. We're going to dive into the offense and maybe discuss reasonable expectations for some of you ad nauseum, but at least at greater length, because it seems like this offense is evolving and adjusting. And that 100 when it came to, when Tim Plow had his initial press conference and he said they want to score 100 points in a football game, honestly, I don't know how reasonable that is anymore. We're going to dive into that in just a moment. But let's just start with your initial impression of the game, how it went, your thoughts, and I think that we can kind of start to call this a defensive-minded football team.
For sure. I think my prediction was defense plays awesome, and then offense will score 40-plus points. I was a little bit off there on the offensive side of the ball. We weren't as explosive as I expected us to be.
Yeah.
But defensively, this 2 weeks straight, we hold them under 27 rushing yards.
Yeah.
They only threw for about 125. That's crazy to say you hold a team to 150, 152 total yards. So the defense is playing great. Like they say, defense wins championships, but offense puts those fans in the seat. So I need us to get it going a little bit more.
Yeah.
It's not enough for me, but you kind of can start seeing what kind of identity this team has.
Yeah.
We're going to just be a team that, we're going to obviously run first. We're going to just pray to God that we can, get the stop on defense, because, if we don't turn the ball over in this game, defense pitches a shutout. The only time they did score was when we turned the ball over in our own territory. So I think if we can just do our job on offense and keep it clean, whether it's, being explosive or not, if we can just keep it clean with no turnovers and win turnover battle every week, we win the game.
Yeah, I think that this defense is so good, they're almost boring. And what that this is supposed to be a compliment, because down in and down out, they're tough to move the ball against. You look back 2 weeks ago, New Mexico, they hit the big 69-yard shot play. Last week, as you said, Boise State turns it over at their own 35. UT Martin actually goes backwards 2 yards, and then on 4th and long, they just huck one up, a 50-50 ball, and the Skyhawks come down with it to score their only touchdown of the game. Outside of that, Shane, outside of those two touchdowns, the farthest that the opposing offense has moved the ball over the last two games is the BSU 31-yard line. That's a 48-yard field goal. There's only so many field goal kickers outside of Jonah Dalmas that can even have success from that range. So, like I said, down in, down out, they have just been a stout defense to move the ball against, and they haven't even really needed turnovers at this point. They've just been able to get off the field on third down at an alarming rate. And so as you're going into a game against a defense like that, what is your mindset, knowing that you better hit an explosive or you're probably not going to hit?
I think you got to do what they did when they did score. I think they were too close to punt and too far to kick.
Yeah.
So they just said, you know what, let's just take the chance.
Roll the dice.
Yeah, and so they took a shot and they got it. But I think you'll see a lot more of this against us with our defense being so stout. It's like, we can't afford just to punt the ball every 3 and out every time. So they might take a few chances. You might see a lot more teams start going on fourth down against us, just trying to get, the upper hand, because It's tough. This defense is playing good.
Yeah.
Well, I also know that we haven't played, maybe the most formidable
Right.
opponents, but it's still hard on defense to hold a team to 25 rushing yards.
Yes.
Back-to-back weeks, that's not easy.
Man, I was throwing out stats on Twitter because that's my jam, And I can't tell you how many replies I got. Yeah, it's an FCS school. Yeah, it's New Mexico. Okay, yeah, I know who they played. I don't care if you're playing Columbia High School. If you're Boise State and you allow 275 yards over 2 games,
That's true.
that's ridiculous.
It's tough to do.
It's tough
a
to
lot
do.
of people don't understand, but especially with nowadays, because if you watch the game on TV, you heard that announcer saying they had a University of Houston transfer, they had a Louisville transfer, they had guys from all over. So with the transfer portal, FCS teams are not the FCS teams
They're
that they
not.
were 5-6 years ago, because kids are now leaving to go actually play other places because they want to actually get film and they don't want to just sit at Alabama 3 deep. And so you got guys at these schools, which is why you see all of these FBS schools knocking off FBS schools every week.
Yep.
Someone gets them.
It's happened a number of times this year. Weber State absolutely crushed Utah State in Logan 2 weeks ago. And I got to say, UT Martin, that's not a bad squad. I bet you we look up and they're chasing double-digit wins again this year. I thought their quarterback was actually okay. They just couldn't, as a team, they just couldn't get in a situation that would allow them to pick up a 3rd down to save their life.
Yeah.
Couldn't run the ball at all. That's another thing, too. You look at 3rd downs with this defense, the last 2 games combined, opponents, 2 for 25 against Boise State on 3rd down.
That's remarkable.
That's impossible to find rhythm if you're an opposing offense. Yeah.
It's really tough. I hate to, jump forward and jump over UTEP, but I'm ready to kind of see a challenge.
I know.
See how do we play in a dogfight.
Yep.
Even though this last game kind of looked like a dogfight for a little bit in the first quarter, it was a tie game, but I think I'm ready to see, what we have.
So all those times when I talked with you when you were playing for Boise State and you said, oh, no, Jay, 1 week at a time. We're not looking to head to San Diego State or Fresno State.
I'm going to be 100% honest with you. If I was still playing, I'd be ready to go play UTEP because this is a chance to get 100 yards, about 10 catches. So, I wouldn't be looking over if I'm a player.
Okay.
This is a great opportunity to pad the stats.
Okay.
But as a fan, just trying to figure out, obviously, like I said, we're starting to see what our identity is, but, I'm ready to see what happens when we get challenged. If we get hit in the mouth, are we discombobulated or do we stick with what we've been doing?
I'm going to relate this to the season the Boise State men's basketball team actually just had, Shane. So I think that Leon Rice's squad this past year, it wasn't quite as offensively gifted as maybe some of his other teams, right? But at the same time, they were unreal on defense. They could get a bucket when it mattered, and they could get a stop when it mattered, right? They had no problem playing teams in the upper 50s, low 60s. And usually his teams are, maybe low 70s in terms of what they average. And they went on to become a historically good Boise State men's basketball team, the best in program history. I want to say arguably, but they were. They went to the NCAA tournament. They won an outright Mountain West title, both regular season and tournament. And they won a school record 27 games. So the thing that Leon did that's a little bit different is, and this is just my interpretation of it, by the way, he leaned into it. I remember after a game that they won, another low-scoring game, and he said, hey, man, we're just going to get in brick fights, and we're going to throw the last brick. And that team was so good at doing that. So as that relates to this Boise State football team, it's time to get, you said a dogfight. I'm going to call it a brick fight because it worked for the Boise State men's basketball team. But there is a positive way to spin this where you do have a defensive-minded football coach. And no, I'm not saying that he doesn't care about offense. But for all of these years where you have had the offensive mind, I remember you telling me stories about your past head coaches that did have an offensive background. And when the defense had a good day of practice, the offense would get yelled at.
Yeah.
But the defense was like, hey, we did good, And so now for so long, the defense complemented the offense. And now this feels like a team where the offense complements a really good defense. And it feels like that's the way it is moving forward.
I totally agree. And what you said, The only thing that this team lacks is can they go get that bucket?
Right.
That's what I don't know.
And
That's where I'm so unsure about.
And when you get into a brick fight, when you're playing a San Diego State team and the score's in the low 20s, can you get that stop, and then can you go get that score to end a football game?
Yeah.
And so that's what it remains to be seen. But in terms of what it's probably going to take, that's probably what it's going to take. I'm not saying this team doesn't have the ability. If there's a matchup they like where they say, hey, let's shift this thing into high gear and go fast, that's fine. But what we've seen the last couple of weeks, especially once they get the lead, it is we are not going to do anything that jeopardizes a possession on offense. We are going to know that if we're going to give the ball to George Holani, he's our strength. Tim Plow said this week he's their best offensive player. And they're just going to ride him to a victory, not do anything too crazy.
And it felt good to kind of see him get back into rhythm.
Totally.
I mean, I don't know when the last time we saw him run for 100 yards was, but
it's been a moment.
He brought it.
Yeah.
He looked good. He looked like freshman year George Holani.
Right. George, I mean, when he finally got healthy last year, the game against Fresno State really stands out to me, where both running, catching, he was dynamic once again. But it was cool to see him get into some space this last week against UT Martin. 226 all-purpose yards. He is unique in the sense that he's a running back returning punts. That has rarely happened at Boise State. And I kind of went back and I looked this up. For a guy to have a day like George did, right? George had 110 rushing yards, 47 receiving yards, 69 return yards. For a running back in all of the FBS over the last 20 years, to have 100 yards rushing, 40 yards receiving, and 60 or more punt return yards in a game, George is top 6, I believe, like elite company. So that stat line is very rare for a running back that is getting 20, 25, 30 carries in a game, you know?
That's not normal for sure.
It's not normal.
Yeah.
I don't think George Holani's normal. We said that at the end of the show last week. It was one of the last things we said last week on the show, and that there was some buzz that, it's got to be Genty or Holani. No, it doesn't. They're a 1-2 punch. And George, I've said this a number of times, I think that if he stays healthy, he competes for Mountain West Offensive Player of the Year.
We got to keep him healthy.
Got to keep him healthy. But we saw last week, 33 total touches. They are going to give him the rock.
That's what shocks me the most about him being on punt return, is trying to keep him healthy.
Yep.
He's taking all these shots from the backfield, and then you put him out there at punt return. But I will say, I feel like he's a little bit more safer there at punt return with the ability, obviously, to call fair catch. But now you have everybody running full speed this way, and he's going this way versus, at running back, he's getting past all 11, and they're just lined up straight across. It's a little bit different. So I think he has the advantage with that.
Yeah, and coaches never really, they don't show us all the cards or lay them out all on the table for us to see. I'm assuming they saw something with UT Martin's punter, because George caught a lot of those punts last week with space, and I felt like that kind of helped get him in a flow for running, as a traditional running back. He got a chance to feel what it was like to operate in space on a couple of punt returns, and then he really started to find his groove. So, 5 punt returns for an individual is kind of a lot in a game these days.
For sure. Usually you're going to get a lot of fair catches.
Yeah. So I think they saw something and they said, let's roll the dice and put George back there. So as we move forward and we talk about this offense, I get that there are people that are critical. I do. I completely understand it. But in trying to criticize fairly, I guess is what we're aiming for here, right? When it comes to the pace in which Boise State operates, when I remember going to the first practices with Tim Plow as the offensive coordinator, and it was like almost an exhausting pace. They got up and they ran plays, right? And they're not doing that anymore.
Yeah.
They're huddling all the time now. And so there has definitely been a shift in tempo, pace, the amount of plays they're trying to run in a football game, which at the end of the day is going to affect how many points you can score and definitely your ceiling on what you can score, right?
Yep. There is not going to be any 50-point games with the offense that we're trying to operate. But it just goes back to that identity thing. I think he is starting to see, okay, this is the type of offense I like to run. Well, this is the personnel I have. And so with his personnel, he's understanding that maybe he needs to limit possessions versus try to get as many as you can. So, against it. I just, I'm glad we're figuring some things out, though.
Yep. And it's foreign to Boise State fans.
Yeah.
There is a stat out there that shows up every single week in the game notes. And they're the number 2 scoring offense in all of college football since the turn of the century. And the only one with more is Oklahoma. And they ran Jalen Hurts and some other gifted quarterbacks through their program that ran that up recently, right? And so they surged ahead of Boise State over the last few years. And so, they averaged on that chart over a 2-decade-plus stretch 37.5 points per game. And at the moment with this current team, 37 feels almost above the cap of what you think that they can go get. And I guess what I mean by that is, and talking about this with you and some other people over there at Boise State, like, you expect to score on 50 to 60% of your possessions. Like, that would be like a good day, right? That's not a great day, not a bad day. You expect to score on 50, 60% of your possessions. So right now, they're like, it seems like their target is like 11, 12 possessions a game. We'll call it 12 just to keep even numbers.
Yep.
So if you score on 6 of those, and all 6 are touchdowns, which that again would signify an unbelievable day, right?
That's tough.
Then you're at 42 points if you make all the PATs as well.
Yeah.
So I mean that's going to be a tough number to hit.
I believe when we play better competition, we won't get to 12 possessions. I think you get closer to 10.
Really?
Because, your teams won't be going 3 and out necessarily.
Yeah.
We'll have to, they'll sustain a few drives. They might even drive down a little, and then maybe 20, 30-yard drives and kicking field goals. So we'll have some of that, which will take away from our count. But yeah, a 12 is a lot.
The fascinating matchups, I think, moving forward is like, you look at, Wyoming or San Diego State, like, you're probably right. Like, you feel like possessions are going to be hard to come by in games like that. I think the interesting ones for me are if Jake Hayner's healthy on October 8th and can play for Fresno, that November 5th game when BYU comes to the Blue, those are offenses that at times, they're going to try to go a little bit more.
Yeah.
So can you get off the field? Can you limit possessions? Can you keep their offenses on the sideline? It's just, again, I just say this out loud. It is a different way of thinking if this, what we've seen the last 2 weeks, is the way that they're going to think.
Here's where I think that Bronco Nation is going to struggle.
Yeah.
So we're used to having the 12 possessions, and let's say we're used to scoring 6 of the 12, and let's say 5 are touchdowns and 1's a field goal. We're used to that. But when you start playing these run teams like Wyoming and San Diego State, and we're only getting 10 possessions, and we're already an offense who, we don't score as much as we usually do. So now the possessions are limited.
Yep.
Now the scoring's also limited. And now the possessions are being cut down, so that means scoring is going to be cut down. So we're already, we scored 31 or 30 this week, and, we were like, oh, that's a lot of points for us this year. Well, we're going to cut that down a little bit more because you have limited possessions. So now we're looking at like a 24, maybe a 20-point game.
Yep.
It's going to change things. It's going to make the margin for errors
Smaller.
way smaller.
Yeah.
So that's where I think we'll get some frustration from the fans, is because why are we only scoring 17 points and winning the game? Well, our defense is good, so that's what's helping us win with 17 points.
Totally.
But, on the flip side, they want offense to score 35 points a game.
I'll say this. So when I grew up, he's had a great run at Virginia. I'm going to bring it back to basketball again. Tony Bennett was the head coach at Washington State when I was going there, like right at the end. And he was such a defensive-minded coach, right? And they would play defense. At that time, it was, 35 seconds. Now it's down to 30 or whatever because of the shot clock. But you would be up 7 with 10 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. And the way that he played defense, or his teams played defense, it felt like 15, right? And so now, that if you're going to play the style of ball, that's what you have to make the opposing offenses feel.
Yeah.
Where it's like, you said that Boise State has to be perfect. An opposing offense is going to go and be like, damn, we got to be perfect.
Yep.
Right? So we'll see. I go back to tempo, though, and I was kind of blown away by some of it when you look at it, because Boise State possessed the ball for 39 minutes and 3 seconds to be exact against UTEP. Yeah. They ran 71 plays. That's a play every 33 seconds on the game clock.
That's a lot.
You can only take 40 seconds between plays, right?
Yeah.
So you're chewing up almost all the time there
They are.
before you snap a football.
Yeah, and we talked about it last week. I think it has something to do with some of those checks, because Hank did the same thing this week.
Yep.
Get into the line.
They huddle.
Yep.
They get to the line.
They check
Then
it,
they check.
and then they call the play.
Yeah.
I think so. You're getting a lot of that, because I'm seeing guys downset hut, look around, and I see all three receivers doing this, and I get out line.
Hey, what does
back
this
up.
mean?
I have no clue.
Okay.
I was never there with Tim, so I'm not sure on those signals.
Is there any guess of what that means? Like roll through to
I
get?
mean, it could be anything from the receivers telling each other, we're going to do a certain type of run block.
Okay.
It could be the receivers' combination that they're going to run.
Yeah.
So, and then what they do is they'll change it. So if it's a run, if it's a pass concept, this week that could have been like a smash concept. So let's say, a corner, a hitch, and then they'll probably just run like a seam with that. And then next week, because teams will say, oh, we saw on film they did this, and then they ran this concept, it'll be a whole different.
You got to switch something up.
Yeah, so it'll be just a new concept every week.
Okay.
Like the go-to type thing.
Gotcha.
They'll switch it up.
Okay. Well, so I don't know. I think there it is. And I think everybody wants to hold half 100 against Tim Plow, because he came in his initial press conference, said, we're not looking at the scoreboard until it says half 100. And I think that, hey, instantly the fan base ate it up. And I get why. I mean, that sounds marvelous. But I just don't think that that's a fair, at least with their current personnel, their current pace, their current defense, the 2022 Boise State football team right now as we know it. Like, if you're working with that as an expectation, or you're going to hold it against them, you're going to be disappointed.
It's true.
I mean, think about what it would take on 12 possessions, 7 touchdowns and a field goal. So you're scoring on 80 or 75% of your possessions, and almost all of them are touchdowns. Like that, again, we get back to realistic expectations. That's not super realistic.
It's true. I mean, even if you look at Hank's touchdown passes that he has, what does he have, 4 or 5? 5? I think 3 of them aren't even explosive plays. They're like 5-yard. He has 2 arrow routes. You had Cobbs in the back of the end zone, about 6 yards.
Yeah, I think the longest one, because you had two to George Halani, you had that shovel to Latrell Caples, you had the one at the back of the end zone to Cobbs.
That's 4.
And then you had the one, the 18-yarder over the middle, where Latrell Caples did his little Julian Edelman, sat down, caught the ball, and took off.
That's your explosive play.
Well,
is that under the threshold?
I said 18's technically for passing. I think that's under the threshold.
Yeah.
I think you look at. It depends.
I think it's 12 for a run, right?
Yeah, 10 to 12 for a run. It depends on who you are judging this. Maybe it's 18 to 20 for pass. I always go with round numbers: 10 for run, 20 for pass.
Yeah, we aren't really explosive. That's where we're missing things at. So it's tough to. If anybody who's watched Boise State in the last 20 years, if you told them that we wouldn't be able to have explosive plays, they'd laugh.
Yeah.
They wouldn't believe it. It's weird.
So how do you untap that? And I got to say, getting George Halani going, the play action game, getting that working, it's certainly something that could help. But at some point in time, it's got to click in the sense that the quarterback's got to throw it, and guess what? The receiver's got to go get it.
It's true. Yeah, we need the receivers to make more plays. I think Caples is starting to, find his rhythm. I like what I'm seeing every week. He's getting about 4 catches every game or more. And when he catches the ball, he's trying to make things happen.
He can get a little yak.
Yeah, I like it.
I can't remember off the top of my head. I want to say somewhere around 68, 70 yak yards out of his 93 receiving yards this season. So he can go get some a little bit.
Yeah, he's making things happen. He might be the guy that's kind of, trying to step into that role.
He's also a sophomore.
That's big.
Which would be nice. I do think that another local name that I do think Boise State misses, Austin Bolt.
For sure.
He broke his leg in game 1, and you see more. For me, it was more so New Mexico. You saw some of the vertical things they tried to do to Billy Bones with those 50-50 balls, and with Austin's speed, length, size, athleticism, you feel like, man, that's probably an area where he could have helped out.
Yeah, I think with him, that's where, like we said, the explosive plays.
Yeah.
We've been getting a few. Hank's had some 30 yards and stuff like that, but more of those have been even catching at about 15 and they're running.
Right.
Austin's presence was, more of a Cedric Wilson, Chaz Anderson type, blow the top off.
You just want to give Chaz a shout out, huh?
Shout out, Chaz. Those are the kind of plays we're missing. We don't have that at all. It's really tough right now.
Yeah, and that, I mean, when you can't do that, does that keep everybody within 20 yards of the ball? And I mean, like,
I would if I'm a defense. You know, keep bringing heat. As you know, if I'm watching film, I see it when you bring heat and bring a little pressure on Hank. He's a little loose with that ball. I don't know what it is, but he seems to always end up with a few fumbles. I think he had 2 this week. He didn't throw an interception, but we had 2 fumbles and we lost 1, and so.
And that's where we come back. If we're going to talk about possession football and valuing possessions, like those are the things that probably can't happen. Not even probably. Those are the things that can't happen. Take the sack, live to play another down, whatever it is. Throw the ball away, whatever. I mean, like you go back and you look at it and like Hank's numbers weren't terrible.
No, they were the best this week than they've been
all season. 72% completion percentage. That's top 4 in his career. 166.7 or 9 QB efficiency rating, top 6 in his career. This will be his 29th game at UTEP, playing at UTEP this weekend. Not 29th game at UTEP, but 29th career college game, and it's at UTEP. So his numbers weren't bad, but you look at 204 passing yards, and you're like, it doesn't blow you away, you know? I don't think, I mean, at the end of the day, like, I guess what this just comes back to is social media right now is kind of a volatile place when you're talking to Boise State football.
Stay off of there.
And again, while I do understand when fans look at these teams of the past and they try to relate it to this team, I get frustrations. I do. But like there was a guy that replied to me, and I was just pointing out a defensive stat, and he's like, I can't believe that you can't understand why fans might be frustrated with this team. And I was like, okay. And then he followed that up with, I mean, I'm still holding out hope that we're good enough to win a Mountain West title, but, and I'm like, isn't that the point? Isn't that the point? So in a way, shouldn't you be actually complimenting them for finding out ways to win games by 3 touchdowns when you don't think they're that good? Or the fact you don't think they're that good but can win a Mountain West championship. I'm like, I'm sorry, like if you hoist a trophy, like, I don't know. Those are the things that just kind of get me at times. And I'm like, and the only reason why I might be sensitive about it is I grew up rooting for a school, and I went to a school that just, if we went 6-6 and got to a bowl game, it was the best thing in the world.
This is true.
I mean, we went to the Alamo Bowl and played Iowa State, and it was like the greatest thing ever. Like, who would consider that in college football as the greatest thing ever? So, hey, maybe my barometer, my scale is a little bit off, but I'm just saying, like.
Hey, you guys had some buzz when I was coming out of high school. I mean, you guys were getting Mike Leach, and I'm from Texas, so I've seen the Mike Leach.
Don't believe in tight ends, throw the guy the ball over the middle of the bunch.
I loved it, you know, the Crabtrees come through there. So, you know, I looked over a little bit, but I don't think the winning record and the losing record kind of hurt.
Well, yeah, they got Leach, but right before that was a very difficult time. I covered teams up in Pullman that lost 69-3 to Cal. I mean, you want to talk about tough things to talk about? Have a season of that.
It sounds like we need to start pulling some of these tweets and answering some questions every week.
Yeah, maybe we'll do that next week.
They get after it on Twitter for sure.
They do. And like I said, I'm not trying to make excuses for the offense. I'm just trying to throw out reasonable expectations for today. He said, this offense, the run scheme, it's complicated, but when it clicks, he's like, you guys will see, it's going to work.
And I think I'm kind of like the fans. I'm so used to seeing us be so explosive that now I'm like, yeah, this sucks. Like, we're winning games, but it kind of sucks. But you just got to kind of adjust. Just like Tim's having to adjust on that offensive end, you got to adjust with him. He's playing with what he has, and so he's making the best of what he has.
Is there any way, I mean, is there any way that you, like, if you were the coach at Boise State, I'm just kidding. Well, I'm not kidding. Is this a short-term thing? I mean, how do you have to hammer recruiting? I mean, these still are a lot of the previous regime's guys that Andy acquired. I mean, he's really only had one single full recruiting cycle. He got here so late the previous year. It was like he missed the first signing day that year, actually, and it was a sprint to the finish line on the second signing day.
You know, it's kind of a little give and take here, because if I'm a recruit right now and Boise State's in my top 3, and I see our defense is great.
Yeah.
And our offense is, you know, not the best, but we have a freshman quarterback on the bench. which means, you know, after this, the next 3 years, we have, you know, someone who'll be there, you know, someone who's pretty athletic.
Yep.
And I see that we're not really explosive at receiver, but I play receiver, you know. Maybe I can come in and play early.
Yeah.
And, you know, so I feel like this honestly doesn't really hurt you recruiting-wise. It might help you more because, I mean, me personally, that's how it was for me. It was, okay, they have Chris Potter, who's 5'9", 150 pounds. I'm 5'6", maybe 6.5, and I'm 150 pounds. He's a senior. I'm coming as a freshman. That means I'll at least get 3 years to kind of have things. So, yeah, so that's how I would
You hardly even had to wait that long.
Yeah, I didn't have to wait that long, thank God.
Yeah.
But that's how I think recruits kind of see it. I mean, obviously with the NIL stuff, that's a whole nother conversation. But as far as playing time, I think I see it. I'm like, yes, I get to go in there next year and I get to go play.
Yeah.
Especially if I can go in there and just make plays and make a spark in practice, I could get on the field fast.
Yeah. UTEP's 1-3, Boise State's 2-1. I'm going to get your prediction in a second, but I want to focus on where this game is being played for a moment, because Boise State is actually going to play in a state where they recruit heavily from. They haven't played in the state of Texas. I'm scrapping the bowl game because that was something everybody wants to forget, and technically it doesn't even count anyways. But the last time during the regular season they played there was 15, 16, 17 years ago. You know, so it's been a very, very long time, and that's going to change moving forward. Andy Avalos said that he's working with Jeremiah Dickey. They both want to play more games in the state of Texas. They have 12 and a half guys from Texas on their roster. Ashton Genty played high school ball there. He listed his hometown in Florida as Jacksonville. So, but the chance for these guys to go home, Steph Cobbs, Latrell Caples, Eric McAllister, those three wide receivers right there. What do you, I mean, you guys down there, it's just so different. That's got to carry a ton of meaning to go play down there.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'll go back to like what we just talked, like recruiting again. So recruiting-wise, that plays a role because so me personally, because we're talking about Texans, you know what, I'm just using myself. So for me, I was gonna, you know, I almost went to Kansas State. And with my mom, when I got down to Kansas State and Boise State, she said, well, if you go to Kansas State, I can drive to every game. You'll play in Texas maybe 5 games out of your 9, because, or you know, out of 10. So, you know, Baylor, Texas, at this time A&M before they made the switch.
Yep.
I mean,
Tech.
TCU, Tech, so it's like all these schools. I was like, yeah, you know. So for these guys, the same thing. If they could maybe, you know, go to UTSA and play a U of H, I think those are matchups that are good for us.
Yeah.
You know, obviously us playing Texas A&M and Texas is probably not best for us right now.
Right.
But playing U of H, will be in the Big 12, so it'll be a Power 5 game.
Which that is happening here in a couple of years.
Yeah.
They have a home-and-home scheduled with Houston. Also, I think way down the line, it might even be getting rescheduled, but Rice is on there too at some point. So
The Rice game will be more of like a, let me see, I'll make sure I say this the right way.
it'll be similar to this weekend, right?
Yeah, you know, maybe a few more athletes, but yeah, it'll be similar to this weekend. For
Yeah.
sure. You know?
Yeah. Well, either way, it's good that they're going to get back down into the state of Texas. I know it means a lot to those players. They're going to be jacked up, ready to play down there. So, if you look at this game, it seems like UTEP is in an interesting spot. You think things are interesting right now at Boise State? You kind of go over and pay attention to them, and the sky's definitely falling for them. They're only, I think Boise State's struggling on offense. They're averaging 14 points per game. That's 123rd out of 131 teams in all of college football.
I'd love to hear that.
Yeah.
Well, to this game.
And all of a sudden now, if you try to shrink possessions on them,
Yeah.
I mean, they are going to have a tough time climbing to 14, I think, this week.
Maybe we can get half 100.
Maybe. Maybe.
I'm looking forward to it. I mean, we need one more week before we get San Diego State anyway. So
Yeah.
let's get the guys healthy who need to get healthy. And I know we had a few guys go down, but let's get some guys healthy and let's go score some points.
Yeah.
Please.
So do you need more than 30 this week?
I didn't get my 40 last week, so I need the 40 this
You need
week.
40 this week?
I didn't get them last
Hey,
week.
I still think it's in there somewhere, because like if you go down and score 40 against last year's Fresno State team, you got the ability to do it this year. You know, you're missing Shaq, but Halani had a huge game. You feel like your offensive line is supposedly a little bit better compared to that team. So, hey, we'll see. So, what do you got then? What is your prediction?
I'm going 10
Ooh,
to 41.
41-10, Boise State. I like it. I think that's good.
I think we're gonna pull those
That's something
guys out early.
Yeah.
I don't think they'll play the whole game.
Yeah.
So they'll
Well, hey, that's actually interesting because I think you're right on that because you saw Zeke Noah kind of go out a little bit early last game. It would be interesting to see what they do there. They said that, between they lost Marco Notarini, which was Zeke's backup. 2 weeks ago, they lost him. So they actually have a walk-on, Ty Tanner, backing up Zeke at the moment, right? Dude, Ty can ball, though.
Yes, he can.
Yeah.
Local kid.
Local kid at Rocky Mountain High School.
Oh, yeah.
So that could be kind of cool to see, but they might have to play musical chairs there with DJ Schramm, Brandon Hawkins, kind of piece that thing together in order to kind of get through a time where we don't really know what's going on there at middle linebacker. So hopefully Zeke can roll because he's been playing great. But back to your point, with those 2 conference games, the heavyweights coming up, if you can get your guys out early, this would be the ideal game to do it.
I don't think at that point you care about giving up 10 if you get your guys for the next game. Yeah, you want to save them.
Okay. Shane, we'll appreciate it. Just a reminder, our coverage from El Paso begins live on Thursday at 6 and 10 o'clock. The Bronco Roundup Game Day Show kicks off at 6 o'clock. We will take you that hour up to kickoff at 7 o'clock from the Sun Bowl in UTEP. Kind of excited to check out the Sun Bowl. The thing's got a pretty good history. There's been a lot of good teams that have traveled in there to play postseason games. But again, Bronco Roundup Game Day Show, 6 to 7 o'clock right here on Idaho's News Channel 7. We'll get you that live look at the field. Last time we went out on the road, we discovered J.L. Skinner wasn't there. Ben Dooley and Mason Randolph weren't there playing right guard. So we got that exclusive look for you live from El Paso coming up on the Bronco Roundup Game Day Show from 6 to 7 o'clock on Friday. For Shane Williams-Rhodes, I'm Jay Tust. This is Jay's Sports Bar, serving the Idaho sports community.